welcome everyone to our first Sunday service. Very exciting. So, the first thing we wanted to do in terms of a Sunday service is kind of talk about, it's on. My boss is asking me if I started the video, in case you were wondering. So, what they had, or what we wanted to put together first is a little bit of why we're here, right? So, we wanted to talk about why even have a church, right? Why is this something that we need as humanists? And so we thought we would go over that first, so sort of the benefits of what it is. And I kind of see it in three categories. So the first is the sense of community. The second is a sense of purpose and perspective. And then the third thing, which we offer that's a little bit unique to a church, is consistency, right? A consistent viewpoint through which to see the world. So the first thing I want to ask, a little bit rhetorically, is why are you here? Right? So we are generally non-religious people. We're humanists. We're independent. We like to think we have a good framework for what it is that we do in the world and why. And yet we still are here. We're still here looking for that sense of community. That's something else that maybe we don't have. And I think from myself growing up I grew up Catholic. There was a sense of community that the church had that I knew was always there. And so that's one piece of it. But the other piece, when I think about it for myself, the reason I'm here is because of my kids. When I think about the world today, and I think about the world that I want to leave them, I think about what can I do to make the world a better place. And there are the small things we can do: be nice to people, contribute in some way, volunteer, physically make the world a better place. But I think the world is essentially a network of human connection. And I think if we don't look to engage and better that sense of human connection, then regardless of what we put into the world in terms of money or effort, the world still won't be that better place. And so to me, that's kind of my ultimate driver in wanting to engage in a community like this, is to build those human connections and repair some of the division that we have in the world today to make that better world. So this morning, Jen and I were talking about what's going on in terms of the deportations of immigrants and the separation of children from families. And when you really think about it, especially if you have kids, it is a heartbreaking story. I could not imagine going to a place and having my children taken away from me and being told that I may never see them again. And we had this discussion that, what can we do? We're two people. We don't have any influence over that sort of thing. And there are the small things we can write our congressman, we can do all that. But what it ultimately comes down to is getting the people that support these ideas to think about it and change their minds, and to do it in a human sense. We can throw out data and we can have the best logical argument, but we know that logic isn't what sways people. It's emotion. And it's the emotion that we get from actually having a human connection with someone who's different from us. I know from my time in Afghanistan that the families there are exactly the same as the families here. They may have different beliefs. They may do different things. Their culture may be different. But they want the exact same thing for their kids that we want for ours. They want their kids to be safe, educated, prosperous. And if we can get everyone on Team Human, to understand that we're all the same, we can start to make that change. We can start to influence people to understand that our actions have consequences. And particularly from our standpoint, being in the country that's supposed to be the beacon of hope in the world, it seems like we should be able to open our hearts enough to understand that everybody's human and that we all have those same needs. So, with that, let's get into a little bit more of the church. It's my public service announcement for the day. It's just something that we had the discussion this morning, and it seems very relevant, but it ties back to why we're here in the first place. And it's that sense of purpose. So from the community. So there's actually a ton of research that shows that being in a community is good for you. There's a lot of research that shows that that being part of a church or being part of a religion, a group with like-mindedness, can have physical impacts on your health. Lower blood pressure. You tend to drink less to excess. You just have a better social circle that is a good influence on you. And it gives you something that you can connect to and be a part of. And then from the side of resilience, when it comes to dealing with stress or with crisis or with loss and grief, having a sense of community is the number one predictor of your ability to be resilient to that stress. I remember reading some research as part of a paper that showed that communities in Israel that were constantly at risk from rocket attack were resilient to that stress, to that terrorism, basically. And the people who were most resilient were the people who had resources in terms of a community and in terms of being able to take care of themselves and their families. And that's part of what the church provides. We are that community that can rely on each other. We can ask each other for help. Again, I know that we're very independent people. We like to be self-reliant, and that's a good thing, and that's a strength and a skill to build. But no one person can be resilient to everything in the world. No one person or no couple can guarantee their own safety and security. It's why we form societies in the first place. And so I think it's important for us to go back to that sense of community and to build one deliberately with people, first of all, who are like us, but have that consistent set of beliefs that we know we can rely on as we deal with the stresses in our lives. There's an important thing that I found a quote, and it reads, "Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it." And I think the same is true of resilience. You don't build resilience in a crisis. You either have it already or you don't. And this is our chance to build that resilience and build that character to prepare us for the times of adversity. And that is what I hope that this church will grow to provide for all of us. And whether it's here in this room or through video land from afar, I really think that this is our opportunity to build something for us and to bring other people into it and to better understand and help each other through our lives. The second thing is purpose. So some people have asked, as we've developed this concept, well, why not things like the Unitarian Church or Sunday Assembly, or why not just a traditional religion? And I think there are kind of two reasons for that. So some of the places are great in terms of community. They do provide that community. There's a like-mindedness. There's the ability to rely on each other. But they lack purpose. They don't have a clear statement of, what are we going to do with this community? And so to me, it's not just that we're okay together and when we can talk with each other and we understand each other. It's that we take that and we move it forward. Like I mentioned, there are children being ripped away from families in our country. What are we going to do about it? How are we able to respond? And as an individual person, it's hard to say. It's hard to say that my action would have a great amount of impact. But I think as a community, and as we grow it, we can. And so that purpose for this church, the way that I see it, is to simply better humanity. To make humanity resilient, that we might continue on for decades and centuries and millennia. And not just to continue on, just to exist, but to make it better, to improve it, to keep our world safe and secure for our children, to maybe one day, get off this planet and start it somewhere else, and keep that moving forward. But that's the sort of thing that I think we can grow, that sense of purpose, that can actually give us a clear path and really focus what it is we do on a daily basis. It also helps us put everything into perspective, right? So it's easy to go through life and look at events as disconnected and to say, well, this is one terrible thing, but maybe it's not, part of some broader trend. Or, I dealt with this person today and they were an idiot, and so I told them off, right? But if we can look at our lives from a sense of community to see how we fit in, how we connect, as opposed to how we are different and separate, I think it changes how we think about things. I think it changes how we interact with people. I think it allows us to give them a little bit more grace, a little bit more room for failure, and to help us prevent some of the biases that we have. And so if we can maintain that perspective through our learning together and through our study of what it means to be human and what it means to be a good human as a part of society, I think that we're going to be more successful, not only in our individual lives, in terms of being happy and healthy, but also as a community. We can actually build healthier communities. And whether it's just our small community of our household, of our group of friends, of our church, of the places of our neighbors where we live, or if it's actually the broader community as we continue to grow, I think that's what we can get out of this church, is that sense of perspective. Because perspective is something that you have to earn, right? And you have to have someone force you out of what's comfortable for you. Now, many of us in here are military or associated with the military. We've been forced to have a little bit of perspective in our time away from home, in our time in other countries. But many of us have gone through different things, different challenges, that have given us different perspectives. And if we can share those with each other, we all become stronger. And no one has to suffer through the specific experiences each of us individually has had. I know from my perspective, I wouldn't want someone to have to go through what I went through in Afghanistan, but I'm also grateful that I went through it, that I could share it and better understand how the broader community is the same. And then the last piece in terms of purpose is what I was talking a little bit about earlier in terms of bridging the cultural divide. It's really interesting to look at parallel trends throughout the last century and a half. So with the rise of the nuclear family and sort of the downfall of the extended family construct, people have also moved away from churches at the same time. And so there's been a significant decay of what I would call community. There's a great book from, I think, the 70s called Bowling Alone. And it tracks the trend of people moving away from social groups. And of course, technology only accelerates that. Technology can be a wonderful tool as we're using today. But at the same time, it can be something that basically hacks our brain in a negative way, that prevents us from being engaged in community. And so when you look at all of those trends, our ability to separate ourselves and to live in almost a complete bubble of isolation has really detracted from our ability to form community. And so, as part of the purpose of our church, I think that we must absolutely and deliberately build that sense of community. And at first it's going to be hard. It's much easier for us to sit at home on the couch today, on a Sunday, on our day off, and watch Netflix, and play video games, and do nothing. I feel it. I know. I love my video games. I would love to be at home playing. But this is so important because the future of humanity, to me, is really at risk. And it's not at risk of, I mean, it could be, some asteroid or some crazy catastrophe that we can't prevent. That's always possible. But barring that, it's going to be on us. It's going to be what we do to ourselves. And so if we don't start to engage now, before the crisis already happens, we will not have built that resilience, and we will not have built that character that will be revealed through adversity. And if we can go out and get people to understand that we are all human, we're all in it together, we're all stuck on this planet together, it doesn't matter what you believe is or isn't true in terms of the facts and global warming and politics and whatever. If we can at least realize we're in it together, we have a common ground to have a discussion with and from. And I think that is a really powerful thing to think of. That simply by building community, we can help people to better understand each other and have conversations. So the last thing that's a little bit of the feature, I think, of this church is the consistency. So as we continue to develop the reflections and the services that we have on Sundays, we'll build the discussion about what we think a consistent mindset is. What is our philosophy of humanism that is consistent for us and that we see as a part of today's world? so, from the standpoint of the church, this isn't a belief system or a faith system. There's nothing here that you have to say, well, just trust me. This is something that everyone should be able to look at and use logic to work their way through it, to see how it makes sense to them. How do they connect to it as an individual? And then how do they as an individual connect to the broader community? And then how does that community connect to the broader world and humanity? It's a fairly easy kind of stair-step method, and we'll talk through it as we go forward. But I think having that sense of consistency in a philosophical system allows us to have that perspective and allows us to have the conversations without having to worry about the things that are conflicting. Right? We can just move forward, focus on what we need to do, and advance humanity. Kind of the last thing I'll say that I want to end with is what we are, or what our goal is. It's not simply to have a comfortable place to be today, but it's really to make a better tomorrow. And so, while it's going to be great, and we're going to have great times being a community, sharing food and sharing stories and learning together, that's ultimately what it's all about. And so I hope this sort of introductory service has been valuable for everyone. I definitely want to keep these short because it's not about me telling you the way things are or the way things should be. This is a church of innovation and development, of skepticism and invention. And so we're going to build it as we go. And it would be easy to wait back until we have the perfect solution, but perfect is the enemy of good. And I think Patton said a good plan today is better than a perfect plan next week. And so we decided we would just start because it's too important to let this wait. So thank you for listening. And now what I want to do is as our sort of final gesture, I want everybody to turn to their neighbor. This is part of the old school church idea. Turn to your neighbor and say one thing that you are grateful for in the last week, and then turn to a different neighbor and say one thing that you're looking forward to in the week to come. And go. Put you all on the spot. Grateful for being healthy.
I'm grateful I get to see you.
We're not sure specifically.
No, I don't know what you this week. It's gotta be something. I'm grateful that some of my friends are more understanding than I'm about certain things.
Oh, really?
What was the second movie? I got Mark. What I'm looking forward to this week.
I'm looking forward to that too. It's not that big. It's far less than very old movie.
I'm looking forward to buying some copies. And I did, yeah. Come on, something good. Yeah, it was kind of fun. I just did that free thing. I was kind of expecting
That
some
is one of your music teachers.
like major tattoo people there. Portraits of them, but just wearing clothes.
Yeah, I didn't see any in the pictures.
No, it wasn't really even.
I'm grateful that the Southern Palace is closed. They decided to cut off some of the party.
Nice. Perfect.
All right, so everyone shared?
Yes.
And so one of the reasons to do that is because of science. So when you can talk about the things that you're grateful for, you actually end up being more grateful. So it's a practice. Gratitude and happiness is a practice. It's not a gift. It's not something given to you or something you that's something that that I think should be a regular feature, is that we just think about. Now that one I think was fun because it sort of illustrated how hard it is to be grateful on the spot. Right? So we all had to think for a minute, and there was quite a bit of silence as we tried to reflect on what it is that we were grateful for. And then being grateful is okay. I think that's something that with practice we can all do, because we can think back and find one thing that we enjoyed, one thing we were grateful for. But I think even harder is to look forward to something, because I think a lot of times in the world we live in, it's too easy to focus on the negative. Humans are programmed to have a bias toward negativity. You can look it up if you'd like. Because in the past, it was a threat detection method, right? So if we focused on the things that were negative, we would detect the threats before they got us. Today's world is a bit different, and we can be drowned in things that we think are threats. And it may seem as the world is only a negative place. But if we can think deliberately about what we can look forward to, we start to reframe our mindset and start to look for the good as opposed to only noticing the bad. And looking for the bad or looking for the good takes way more effort than finding the bad. And so I wanted to sort of end with that piece as a way for us to start to hack ourselves, right? To use the psychology and the science that's out there to literally and individually make ourselves better and happier people. And it takes practice and deliberate thought. And so gratitude will be a talk in the future, and there's a lot of research out there right now on it. And it is something that's hard, especially if we were not raised in that way, where we were taught to be grateful. You basically have to reprogram your mind. And you can do it, but it takes time. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for those who are watching at home. I look forward to talking and engaging with all of you as we go forward. And I look forward to seeing you all engage with